So hi guys, how are you? I suppose first and foremost, Happy New Year, and I hope everyone had a good Christmas, and I hope whatever your New Year's resolutions are, that they include spending more time in nature, because it's just the right place for us to be, and maybe we've forgotten that. But anyhow, the purpose of today's video, I'm just finishing off a net needle here, and I'm going to put my Wright Genesis back into its sheath just for a second. I'm going to wind on a bit of jute twine onto this net needle anyhow. So incidentally, I might as well tell you how I do this while we're doing this. So I like to, as if we're starting off, a little reverse 2-ply reverse wrap, and it gives us a little bit of security when we put it over here. Okay, so that's holding that in place now, and then I'm turning it in a clockwise fashion, and I load it on, so on and so forth. Okay, now I'm not going to be making a fishing net or a punch net here today, but what I am going to be doing is talking about a time-proven knife in my collection, and that is the Wright Genesis knife. Now, I suppose the reason that I'm finishing off this net needle here today is because Morse Kahansky always maintained that your survival knife must be able to perform this task in a prompt fashion and in quite quick time. I didn't time this one today. I don't know how long it took me, but I've made quite a few of these in my time, certainly several hundreds of them, so I could almost do them with my eyes closed. But however, it is a great test for your survival knife, and I believe that there's a couple of things that your survival knife must be able to do, and one of them, I suppose, in terms of just the versatility of your knife being able to perform different cutting tasks, is to make one of these. And of course the other one then, I think, which is a great test for your survival knife, is cutting out a heartboard and shaving down a spindle for a bow drill. And I have a couple of thoughts on that, why I think that that's a great test for your survival knife. Well, firstly, you have to batten, so you have to batten wrist teak like material to make a heartboard that you're going to drill into, and you have to shave down your spindle of a similar or same type of timber to about yay long and about yay thick, and it's a good general test for your knife's dexterity. You then have to drill with your knife tip. I'm going to cut this off now. You have to drill with your knife tip to perform the initial indentation on your heartboard to burn in your spindle. Now this is where a spear point blade, which I really favour, comes in very, very handy, because your drilling point is always in the centre of the knife, okay, and it's just easy. Now you then burn in your heartboard, and after you've burnt in your heartboard, what you've done is you have taken a soft type wood, because that's what we use when we're making bow drills, but you've taken that soft type wood and you have changed the attributes and elements of that wood, because you have somewhat fire hardened it by burning the spindle in, and now we have to cut our keyhole out. So it's a very, very good test, cutting out an area that has been now the elements of that timber has been altered and has become quite hard. So it's a good test for your Scandi grind or whatever type of grind you have. Anyhow, it's not what we're here to talk about today, but it is a good generic test. The other test which I feel is really, really good is the ability to make some sort of a deadfall trap, whether it's a figure 4 or, you know, a Raymir's widget trap or whatever, a Siberian deadfall trap. But any of these traps, if we can make deadfall traps, if we can make bow drills, and if we can make a bow drill set, we also know that we can batten down wrist thick material, and we also know that we can cross batten wrist thick material, so we can make shelter as well. What else do we need our survival knife for? Now, the beauty of a knife of this size is it's not a pain in the ass to carry, okay? So, like, I mean, do I like kukri knives? Yes, I do. I'm very fond of kukri knives. However, it's highly unlikely that I'm going to carry an 11.5-inch bladed kukri knife on me when I'm just going into the woods for a walk or a hike, or going fishing or something like this. This can be my fishing knife. This is my fishing knife as well. This can be my deer hunting knife and is my deer hunting knife, and the same for when I go out rabbit shooting or whatever. I've dressed countless amount of deer with this, well, not this one, my other Genesis, the green one, and I have dressed hundreds of rabbits, paunched hundreds of rabbits, and skinned and gutted plenty of squirrels as well, and lots of trout and fish. So the knife performs those tasks quite well also. What does this knife do particularly well? Well, what it really does particularly well, and this is so vitally important, and somehow a lot of companies have gone ass about face when it comes to actually making knives, and they sacrifice so much to make it look, as I call, sci-fi cool. This knife is superbly comfortable. Okay, it's, you know, when it comes to comfort, I have never handled a knife as comfortable as the LT Wright Genesis, and I can use this knife all day long, and I have done on numerous occasions. I can use it all day long and I will never get a hot spot, and you can too, because of this neutral grip that you get with the broomstick type handle. It is perfect in your hammer grip. It's also perfect in your chest lever grip. Whatever way you want to hold this knife, pinch grip, it's perfect. Okay, it really is super comfortable, and that is so important and so much forgotten in this society where people are designing knives that aren't using them, and they're getting pats on the back for the design that they've made. And you put this knife in your hand, I'm not going to mention any knives, but there's lots of knives out there that you put in your hand and you use it for half an hour, your hand is aching, and you're not going to gravitate towards a knife like that. And not only are you not going to gravitate towards a knife like that, if you find yourself in a survival scenario with such a knife, you're heading for a speed bump in your survival experience, because you're probably going to injure yourself somehow by trying to compensate somehow and make it more comfortable. Okay, this is a simple design, but quite often, you know, with most things in life, you'll find that people initially start off with something very simple, and then they move on to something that's super duper fancy, and eventually they go full circle and go back to something that is quite simple. I would say that this is, you know, and like, you know, I have an awful lot of knives, but, you know, this is always at the very top of my list, purely from the point of view of performance and comfort. It really does everything that you need in a survival knife. And yet, as I say again, with the 4.25-inch blade, just over palm width, it's not a super heavy knife. The proclivity or propensity to carry is quite high. And that's such an important element in your survival knife, because your 4.25-inch bladed Genesis is a far full tang Genesis is far better than your 11.5-inch kukri knife that's at home because you didn't bring it because it's so heavy. You know, guys, it's a no-brainer. And this knife can do pretty much everything that you need within survival, in my thinking. It certainly can in the way that I teach survival. Now, I'm a champion of spear points. I really like them, and the main reason that I really like a spear point is that it's incredibly tough. There's a hint in the name. It's a spear point, so this point is strong enough to be used as a spear. I'm not suggesting we use our knife as a spear, but it's a strong, sturdy point, and this can be very important, especially when you've got a 4.25-inch bladed knife. So if we're battling through risk-taking material, quite often all we'll have is the tip protruding to batten upon. And in some continuous cut and curved blades, there is an issue with some of them, because they've such a fine point on their tip that they can break under heavy battering. And I've seen this happen, and you'll see quite an awful lot of continuous cutting blades of about this size where they actually have a break off on the tip, and it resembles an almost like a tanto kind of chisel point on that, where it has broken away. It's a very delicate point. The Genesis, which is the knife that I've been hammering on for over 8 years, and I don't know how many students maybe I've taught using this knife on courses, probably hundreds at this stage. This knife has taken all the abuse that I've thrown at it, and not that I want to be abusive towards a knife, but I need to know as an instructor what this knife can take. And I would say to, you know, students that come on my course, what do you need in a survival knife? So I'm going to narrow it down for you. The first and foremost element that we need in a survival knife is a supremely comfortable handle, okay? Because this is the business end of the knife. No matter how good the blade is or how good the steel is, if that knife isn't comfortable in your hand, how are you going to figure out a way of using it all day? And you're going to be using your knife a lot when you come on a course with me. So that's the first thing, and the Genesis has ticked this box. Number two is, it has to be thereabouts around a palm width, okay? We've all heard that this is a Morse Kahansky guideline, but a knife of this size, for me, ticks two really important boxes. Firstly, it's small enough to be versatile, and what we need in a survival knife is something that's highly versatile, something that can perform a numerous multitude of tasks, which this can, with ease. There's no issues, like, I mean, you're not struggling. The other thing then about having this palm width size is, we know that we have a knife that's in a relatively light package then, and we're back to, this is something that I teach on my courses, and different survival instructors teach different ways about survival. But for me, one of the fundamental things that I teach is that we don't chop, we never chop with a knife, or we don't use any chopping actions when we're in a survival scenario, because chopping can lead to extreme personal injury. So what we do is we use our knife and a batten, and we're battening stuff, so your blade is staying stable and it's not really moving. Your batten is moving, and that is causing the inertia rather than chopping. So at least we now know that if we do get a cut from a knife like this, that is going to be somewhat superficial rather than something that would be could be limb altering in the event that you had a 10 or 11 inch bladed knife. We have to understand that in survival scenarios too, people behave in a fight or flight fashion. So all these fine motor skills that we have, they take a huge dive, okay? And we go back to the motor skills of a Neanderthal. And the problem with that is, that's when we start breaking stuff. So full tang is really important. Now, am I saying that you can't survive with a Mora Classic number 2? No, I'm not saying that. I feel that I myself could survive with a Mora Classic in that stick tang profile. But here's the thing, a lot of the people that come to do courses with me on survival courses, they haven't invested 20 or 30 years in the woods learning how to survive, nor do they want to. They want to learn in a 2 or 3 day course how they can effectively survive. So I don't have the time, and they haven't invested the dirt time to have the ability to survive or take the risk of trying to survive with a stick tang knife that very well may fail. So this knife won't fail on you, and yet it's small enough that someone that isn't very au fait with using knives are less likely to cause a personal injury with such a knife. Now, so we've covered the full tang element of it. In addition to that, I like a knife that has an inert handle. This is micarta. You can hammer on this, you can beat the crap out of this, it doesn't matter, okay? So there's nothing going to break there. LT, they create, when they're creating the micarta, and it's connected chemically with an epoxy and mechanically with these fisheye bolts, okay? So there is no way that we can have any kind of dirt ingress that can spread the slabs, which I've seen on slab-sided full tang knives. Nothing can get in, or it can't get in between the tang and the handle, so it can't spread it, so that it won't delaminate. Now, what's really important in a survival knife also is a spine, a 90-degree spine, okay? Not just for striking your ferrocerium rod and creating that spark, because it's not just for that. It's also for creating fluff for a flash tinder when you want to scrape down soft wood and create a fluff, or maybe some fat wood and create a fluff. It's also a fantastic tool for scaling fish, okay? Now, we may find ourselves that we're stripping bark off poles that we want to reduce the weight of or whatever. Your 90-degree spine can save your live edge by doing this action, and this has a fantastic 90-degree spine. In fact, if I have a bit of jute here, I'll show you. We might as well show you the method that I teach in Eagle Ridge Survival School of how to strike a ferro rod. Now, there are numbers. I'm not saying any method is wrong, but this is the method that I teach, and if you bear with me, you'll see that it makes sense. As you can see, this is my light my fire, which is my preferred ferro rod as well. I like the hard constituents of these. They work very, very well. So what I do is I plant my hand above the tinder, okay, and what we're drawn back. Now, the benefit of this is the knife is stable and it's not moving towards our flash tinder that could then be strewn all over the forest floor. So here, and draw back, and you can see there that the spine on that is like pretty much crazy sharp, okay. Believe it or not, you can actually cut twine with the back of this knife, okay. So I think I have covered almost everything about what is probably my ideal bushcraft stroke survival knife. And when I say bushcraft stroke survival knife, I mean a survival knife that's in the size of a bushcraft knife, because the one thing that I really push when I'm teaching survival is that the knife has to be small enough that you can carry it on you at all times. Because if you don't have your knife on you at all times, if you're not always prepared, you're never prepared. That's the reality of it. And there is an old Murphy's Law that'll come and that'll bite you in the ass the day you don't have it. Now, the only other thing about a knife that I can say is that it must come in a sturdy sheath. There's two reasons for that. One, we don't want to lose our knife, because our knife is our life in a survival scenario. So in this model, this is the DWX sheath. When I have this on my hip, I'll push this up. This locks the knife entirely into its sheath, and it cannot come out. Now, in the JRE leather sheath that I don't have with me here today, what I would do, so that can come out now once I drop this bolt. But what I do, you can see I have a brightly coloured tang. There's a purpose for that too. I have this brightly coloured tang. This would be on my hip, and just above my belt, on my belt, would be a carabiner that I can clip into this. So there's no way by means of lanyard that I can lose this knife, even if for somehow it did happen to find its way out of the sheath. The other purpose for the sheath, of course, is in the event that we fall, that is going to protect us from becoming injured. Now, last thing on the LT Wright Genesis, the purpose of the orange coloured handle. We can see that this knife is quite a natural tone. You can see, and you can imagine that it could be difficult to find this if we left it down on the forest floor. We have the orange paracord, which is a very unnatural colour, and it allows us to recover our knife in the event that it falls. Now, just one point on knife safety, and I don't know if I've covered this on a video before, but I have seen people injure themselves on courses striking ferro rods. So the gig that happens generally is they strike their ferro rod, they ignite whatever flash tinder they have there, and now they're in such a panic that they throw their knife on the floor, and they're probably on their hands and knees while they're doing this, and the next thing they're kneeling on an unsheathed knife. Now that's a recipe for disaster. Can you imagine this happening in a survival scenario? So if you can imagine that I'm lighting flash tinder, I'll get down on my knees and give you an example, okay? I have no tinder to light here, but we're going through the motion. I'm anchoring my knife above my flash tinder. I'm drawing my ferro rod, okay? And I'm amazed that this is lighting, and I put my knife here. I have fire, the different gears of firewood ready here to go. I'm moving my flash tinder to here, and I put my knee like that over my knife. Can you imagine the scenario? I've seen it happen, okay? So the correct protocol is, ideally this is on my hip. I don't have it on my hip today because I wanted to show you the knife, but let's assume I plant my knife and hand so it's anchored. I draw my ferro rod, okay? I then put my ferro rod into its loop and my knife back into its sheath on my hip. Now I move about creating my fire, okay? I'm not doing anything in such a panic that I can cause a personal injury. These are things that are vitally, vitally important and very much forgotten when we're dealing with survival scenarios. And what we have to understand is the level that we train at is the level that we will perform at. So, you know, sometimes students on courses might say to me, well, you're being a little bit pedantic about this, but I'm not. The reality is you train as you want to perform. And that's really, really important. So guys, give LT Wright a look if you're looking for a knife. If you didn't know it, okay, but I've been kind of telling everybody about LT Wright over the last 8 years or so. I am the Irish brand ambassador for LT Wright knives, and if you've ever looked at my logo, the LT Wright Genesis features in the logo of my company. And the reason for that is that predates the time that I was an ambassador, okay? And that's vitally important. It's not I became brand ambassador of LT Wright and then put the Genesis on my logo. It was there before the logo, and if I never had have been a brand ambassador for LT Wright, it still would be on my logo, okay? Because this knife, and before I go, the only reason I have this knife is Gary Doyle. Gary Doyle put me onto this knife, and I'd seen this knife, and I suppose I said to myself, well, you know what, it's a bushcraft knife. It's not really that much different to a wood lower or a jack lower or any of those. There's a litany of different knives that are quite similar. And then I was in Gary's cabin and I handled the knife, and within 2 hours I had ordered an LT Wright Genesis. As soon as I put my hand on it, I realised I got it, and it was a very, very well designed knife. Super simple, but super simple can often be quite difficult to make work, you know, because everything has to be right. So we're looking forward to having some adventures with you in 2024. I'd like to thank Gary for putting me onto this knife, the LT Wright Genesis, and I'd like to thank LT Wright. They're really, really good people, and if you're reaching out to them, tell them I sent you, and they will really stand on their head to try and make things work for you. Okay guys, we'll see you soon, definitely next week, and take care.